joining us for our panel discussion on this subject, Optus Chief Marketing Officer Melissa Hopkins, Managing Director at M&C Saatchi Sport and Entertainment, Jamie Gilbert-Smith, and, of course, no relation, SBS commentator and former Socceroo, Craig Foster. How are we, guys?
Yeah, very good.
Good morning. It's so lovely to have everyone here today. We will start with you first of all. Melissa, why was Optus so keen to get involved with the Women's World Cup?
Well, look, we obviously have a big commitment to bringing a different style of football to Australia and grow that massively. So for us, actually just expanding on that with the Women's World Cup was an amazing opportunity. I think the thing we're probably most excited about with it, though, is that we've just sort of taken it to another level. So we've sort of got, I think it's nearly 100 live shows, 1,000 pieces of content, and we're really committed to showing Australia actually how fabulous and, dare I say, our most successful sports team is, which is the Matildas.
Well, it is an amazing brand, and from your perspective, Jamie, articulate from your side of the business why it is so attractive.
So I think you've got to go back to why sponsorship in the first place, and it's the opportunity for brands to demonstrate what they're about. And I think associating yourself with something like the Women's World Cup is an incredibly powerful platform, and it speaks to a huge segment of the population.
The one thing, Craig, and I don't mean to interrupt, is FIFA. Have they spent anywhere near enough money? Have they given anywhere near enough commitment? I mean, we went back to 1991, they were so cautious they didn't even call it the World Cup. What do you think?
Right. No, they haven't, and this discussion is really important to be articulated through this World Cup, but particularly at this point in time when women's sport in Australia and around the world is so much in the centre. Just look at what the Australian Matildas had to do. Our own female players have had to actually put a case on the table against FIFA to be run after the tournament in relation to the prize money and the disparity. And as everyone knows, not too long ago, FIFA had an uplift in both the male and female, and despite having statutory obligations for gender equality and non-discrimination, the males was almost 50 million greater, and the female they doubled, but only by 15 million to 30, right? So, which was absolutely disgraceful. I've got to say the Australian players and our professional union here were one of the few around the world. The New Zealanders, likewise, who said, look, that's simply not enough. We don't think that demonstrates the requisite commitment. But, you know, the players are having to take up the case themselves, which I think is fabulous.
Mel, what's your take on this? Have you identified, I suppose, any issues since coming on board?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our campaign for us was very much about, I think there's a lot of people that are just, dare I say, talking the talk. And the need to really walk the walk is important. So, you know, certainly for us, gifting basically the Women's World Cup to all school kids, that was big for us because it's not just about women supporting women. It's about the guys too, and I think they very much can create that change. For me, the biggest shock coming in, and indeed we challenged some of our media partners when we pulled the campaign together, is just how little exposure female sport gets, be that in your regular news broadcast, be that even in the paper. And I think it's not just brands, and I certainly don't even think it's just sporting associations. I think the media has a really big job to do also, to really push and drive people to want to follow and see how great women in sport are.
Jamie, your take on this? Because for us that watch it, I mean, watch Sam Kerr score 4 goals the other day against Jamaica. That is just compelling television. It is compelling viewing.
Yeah. And the athleticism, the sheer talent of these women, especially you see them in live sport, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a complicated question. Craig, to your point around the funding in the sport, I was looking at actually the prize money, and if you break it down, what players will receive. So of that $4 million, let's say the Matildas win the World Cup, they get $4 million. Of the players get 1.2 out of that. Boil it down to player by player, they get $52,000 each, which is 24% of what the head of FIFA earns in a month. Which is just despicable. So you look at that, and then you look at the actual ability of the players. You get to an argument of, well, how does it compare to the men's game? They are two different games that are equally valuable. And I think that the bigger question comes, should the dollars follow the eyeballs, or should the dollars be invested ahead of the curve?
That's exactly right, and that's a question.
Yeah, it's a bit like that, isn't it? What comes first, the chicken or the egg?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly, and so the problem with women's sport, and with women's football in particular, is that question is not asked of the men, but it's asked of the women. So the playing ground is not level. So what they'll say is that, oh, well, the sponsorship revenue is not there, or there's only 1 billion people watching and much more in that. Yeah, but if you look at the quantum that they've invested in the men's game to try and build it constantly, that question is never asked. It's never measured against what was the money that's been lost on doing that. And the same occurs here. The amount that's been invested in our professional male competition, for example, is immense. And wonderfully so, but on the female competition, nowhere near. So but until you invest the money in the women's game, give them the opportunity, you can't possibly use that discussion.
And Craig, FIFA has put 2 huge games on at the same time as the women's final. First of all, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you're talking about the Copa America and so on? Yeah. Well, look, firstly, there is far too much football on at the moment, and I think that the players have got to turn around and ask about the load on them, ask about the respect that the women are going to be given when their own tournament is on. But my question about both the money and these issues is, and we talked about having male champions, and you know, many of us around the world who are saying, look, women's football needs to be respected now and invested in immediately. FIFA have $4 billion US in reserves. And yet they're saying, look, we think, you know, we'll give you a handout. It's an arbitrary decision based on what we think is right. And, of course, it's predominantly run by men. My question around all of these issues, including that one, is at what point will the women actually step up and assert their rights? And I think that's just starting to occur now, in particular with our Matildas, who have very courageously said, well, we're going to step forward and actually take FIFA on in this regard on behalf of women around the world.
You can feel the reverberation. From your perspective, your organisation has decided to take the leap. You've obviously done your due diligence. What's it been like? What's it been like for your brand?
It's been unbelievable. And I think actually for me, and indeed everyone, it's people coming up onto the street and just saying thank you. And you know, telco brands don't usually get that.
No, you usually get you can get hammered from perspective.
No, absolutely. But you know, it is people that, you know, they're 6-year-old kids that look at it. The conversation that started in schools where, you know, boys and girls, I think, are sort of, gender doesn't really come into play around success until you probably come around 12, and they don't even understand why it's not an issue. So I'm really proud of us for pushing it out there. My fear is we push it out there and we'll continue to do it. We're one brand. And, you know, the likes of a Nike, for example, have done some spectacular work around that. But I do think it is on everyone in Australia that has the opportunity to influence to really, really look to change that. For me, I'd love the conversation with women in football not to be about gender. I'd like it to be about talent.
Be nice, wouldn't it?
And Jamie, another fairly broad question for you, big question for you. How do you think we can go about changing this attitude, or starting to change this attitude towards?
Well, it's interesting because I've got 3 boys under 5 and I see how they talk about gender, and it's so ingrained in everything that we do. But I think it fundamentally comes down to you can't be what you can't see. And I think that's what Optus is great in doing, is showcasing and giving young girls the ability to see, to develop role models, female role models.
100%. And look, as a father of an under-12s defender who calls her defence the Rock of Gibraltar, she'll kill me for saying that, or the Great Wall of China. It's to your point about aspirational. You know, what do I see? What can I become?
That's true, and one of the beautiful things about the Matildas is the people they are as well. And you know, what's happened throughout this World Cup, I think, has also been fantastic. And another reason why Australia loves them, and rightly so. You know, when you saw Sam Kerr after the first game, and then you know, the second when they'd beaten Brazil, which is an extraordinary performance to come down from 2 goals, of course. and then the openness and the honesty with which she was talking, agree or otherwise, doesn't matter. What it did is it started a whole discussion around...
There was a bit of that tribalism as well. Even if it means something to them, who cares, really?
Yeah, I think that's right. But also, you know, in male sport, to a large degree, it's been homogenised a great deal, and, you know, we lack authenticity a lot, I think, in the athletes and the people who they are. And you look at Sam Kerr and you know exactly who she is, what she stands for.
Suck on this, yeah.
Yeah, and her, that's right. And her social conscience is also very important. They also talked during the World Cup about the issue around sexuality and so on, and Sam came out afterwards, you know, after that with, I thought, and Chloe Lagaza, some wonderful comments. And finally, the piece on, with this abuse on social media and so on that Sam was able to bring out is also another really important discussion. So through the team, we're able to have, you know, all of these discussions for Australia to be looking at a group that we're so proud of in so many respects.
Well, thank you so very much for joining us. One quick question. Who's your tip for tomorrow morning's game?
The Matildas.
Can they do it? Can they get the job done, Craig?
Oh, they certainly can. Let's hope they do.
We're going to work on a little line, Nice, Norway, like we had the miracle of Montpellier. We'll try and think of something before the end of the show. But 5-0 Matildas over Norway tomorrow. Look, thanks so much for coming in. Really important conversation.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.